In this lesson, we're going to continue discussing the stacking order of objects and the Layers panel. If you'd like to follow along, go under the File menu to Open, and in the Sample Files folder, choose 0311-0312 Stacking Order, and then hold down your Command or Control key on a PC and click on the next file, and just click Open. We're going to start by creating a new layer. Let's open the Layers panel. If you click on the Create New Layer button, you'll have a new layer. You can change the name of that layer just by clicking and then clicking again and typing in whatever you want the name to be. I'm going to call it Type. I'm also going to change the name of the second layer to Rectangles. Then I'm going to create a third layer. You can actually change the order of layers. I'm going to click on this layer and drag it downward. And then if I double click, I'm going to get my layer options window. I'm going to change the name of this layer to Background and just click OK. Why don't I open up my Rectangles layer by clicking on the disclosure arrow, and now I can see all of the rectangles as well as other objects in that layer. I can click on the selection square next to any object. How about the Type in Front object, which is this? If I click on the selection square immediately to the right of the listing, I can select that object. And then I can change the stacking order. I can click and drag upwards or downwards through that stacking order to move the object into exactly that location. And you can see now Type is actually in front of everything else in that layer. I can also move an object from layer to layer. If I click on the selection square and drag it upwards right under my Type layer, it's now in the Type layer. I know it's in the Type layer because the layers are actually color-coded. And you can see my top layer is red, and the bounding box around the object is also red. The label for the other layers is totally different to make it really obvious what object is in what layer. Like for instance, why don't I select my bottom rectangle? I'm just going to click on it right here. And you can see there it is. It's behind everything else in that layer. And when I clicked on it, it's actually in the bottom of the listings. I actually want that to be in my background layer. So what I'm going to do is click on my selection square and drag it downward until it's under background. If I hit my disclosure arrow, you can see that now that rectangle is in the background. I can hide it by clicking my visibility eye, but I can also lock it. And that makes it easier to select just the objects in the layer that I want, because with the rectangle locked in the background layer, I can't select it. Let me unlock my background rectangle. I can also change the stacking order of objects within a particular layer. If I click on my rectangle that's currently on top, watch what happens when I start dragging it down. It's now behind other objects. How about if I click on the one all the way in the back? Let me see which one that is. It's actually this yellow rectangle. If I click and drag it all the way to the top, you can see now it's in front of everything else. Let me deselect everything just by clicking off of my layout with my selection tool. Why don't we go to the other layout? If I wanted to select an image in a frame, let me do that. I'm going to click on the layer that says Image Alternate. If I wanted to select the image within the frame, not the frame itself, I could just click on it like this. But maybe what I want to do is select the image within the frame that's cropping it. If I hold down my Option or Alt key and click on the selection square, it's now selecting the image within the frame, and you can see how it's being cropped by the frame. Let me click off of that. If I wanted to select all of the objects in a particular layer, all I have to do is hold down Option or Alt on a PC and click on that layer. And you can see by Option or Alt clicking on my type layer, I selected all of the type in my layout. If I wanted to lock a certain object, we know that I can actually just click on the lock box and that object is no longer selected. You can see that the selection square is not colored in with the label color from that particular layer. What if I wanted to lock everything in a layer except for one particular object? If I hold down my Option or Alt key and click, you can see that it's now locking everything in that layer except what I Option Alt clicked on. Let me undo that. Hold down Option or Alt and click again on that same object. If I were to Option or Alt click on that one layer, watch what happens. Only that one layer is visible. Let me Option or Alt click on that layer again. I can also do this. If I click and drag down the visibility eyes, I can turn off as many objects as I click and drag over. Let me go the opposite direction to turn them back on. I can do the same thing with locking. If I click and drag, I'm locking everything that I click and drag across. Let me undo that just by clicking and dragging over the locks. Another thing that I can do with layers is I can have alternate versions of the same layout. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I have an image alternate, and then I have another image underneath it. If I click the visibility eye next to image alternate, I can see that alternate image. Kind of cool. Let's look at the options for a particular layer. To get into the options dialog window for a layer, all you have to do is double click on the name, and you can see it's opening a layer options dialog window. There's a lot of things that you can do within this window. You can change the name, but you can also do that directly in the panel by clicking and then clicking again on the name and just typing in another name. I can change the color coding if I want, just by clicking down on that pop-up menu and choosing some other color. I can uncheck Show Layer, and the layer will not be shown, but I can also do that just by simply clicking on the visibility eye. I can lock a layer just by checking Lock Layer, but I can also do that right here by clicking on the empty lock box. I can have layers that do not print. If I had a layer that I had notes in that I didn't want to print, I can put them in a particular layer called Notes, let's say, and uncheck Print Layer, and it will not print. I can make it so that my guides are showing or not showing, just by simply checking or unchecking Show Guides. You'll notice that I have a separate layer called Guides. If I had all of my guides in that layer, I can lock all of my guides just by simply locking the guides in the guides layer. Let me uncheck that. Then there's this very unusual setting. It says suppress text wrap when layer is hidden. What is that about? Let me click OK and I'll show you. I'm going to hide this particular layer, and you can see something rather unusual happening. The text is still wrapping a layer that I can't see. Well, that's really strange. If I double click on my images layer and now check suppress text wrap when layer is hidden and click OK, you can see that the text is no longer wrapping around an object I can't see. Let me turn my images layer back on, and you see it's rewrapping it. And now let me turn on my alternate. This is a great way to show a variety of layouts that are similar to your client so they can make their decisions. You can also do various languages in the same layout, and you can have each one of those languages, the type for that language, in a separate layer. Let's look under the Options menu of the Layers panel itself. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about. Paste remembers layers. Let me check that, just so you can see what it does. You can see it's now checked. If I were to select everything, let me do that. I'm just going to unlock my background layer and now select all. Go into the Edit menu to select all, or Command A or Control A on a PC. And then I'm going to copy everything. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy. And I'm going to open a brand new document, File, New Document. And I don't want facing pages. I'm just going to click OK. And watch what happens when I go to Edit, Paste in Place under the Edit menu. It not only is pasting the information, because Paste Remembers Layers is selected, it's actually bringing the layers along for the ride as I copy and paste. Another thing that this does is if within a particular document you copy an object from one layer and then paste it, it's always going to remember what layer it was in and it will paste it in that layer. We're going to begin discussing working with objects in the next lesson.